In the lab, Neil sits in front of a computer. He's suddenly got a message from Officer Rick. He shows Neil that he's got Sergeant Stark locked up in jail for vigilante. As soon as the computer is off, he quickly tells Professor Shawson. She sends him to the sewers to investigate. Officer Rick also bring Repty, Cypher and Holly too. So the whole gang walked out the lab building. They make their way down to the city. Neil opened the sewers. Holly said, "I'm not sure why go under the toilet." Cypher said, "It's the only way to find out what Officer Rick is up to and then stop him." So the gang climbed down into dirty, stinking, wet sewers under London. Neil said, "This better save my dad." Repty replied, "We won't let anything happen to your paternal parent." Repty hovered on the metal area while the whole gang makes their way through. Jodie, Quinn and Jed following them discreetly. Jodie asked, "Why are we hiding? We should be involved helping Neil and Repty." Quinn said, "I'm concerned that this is a trap that Rick is leading them to." As the gang reached to the area, Repty said, "Life form detected." Officer Rick entered, carrying a gun, and said, "Ah, Repty, at last you've come to me." Repty asked, "What do you want?" Rick said, "You to come with me, and it's no good trying to blast me, because I will kill one of your friends in time." As he's pointing his gun at Neil, Neil said, "You'll never get away with this. If you hurt my dad..." Rick said, "Don't worry, he's unharmed for now. Here's a deal. If you give up Repty for me, your dad's life will be spared." So then Jodie, Quinn and Jed came in, throwing stink bombs, so everyone coughed. Quinn brought Cypher and Holly out, but Neil tripped and fell over to the ground. So Repty tries to help him. As Rick was about to fire his gun, Cypher, Holly, Jodie, Quinn and Jed ran away. Holly asked, "Where did you get those stink bombs?" Jed said, "From a joke shop." So then Rick stopped firing his gun, then he pointed it at Neil again, but suddenly the green lasers blasted at Rick. Repty said, "That wasn't me." There was Serp, the blue robot snake, Ophidan, the pink robot snake, and Python, the yellow robot snake, showed up. So Rick ran away through a doorway. Repty asked, "What are you guys doing back here? I noticed you received your license to shoot." Serp said, "We need to find a safe area so we can talk." Meanwhile, in London Street, Mr. Downing was patrolling and he noticed a sewer door was opening, so he ran to open it. And then he's surprised to see Holly, Cypher, Jed, Quinn and Jodie climbing out. Mr. Downing asked, "Holly, what is going on?" Professor Shawson is typing on computer saying, "Someone report. What's happening with Sergeant Stark?" Mr. Downing questioned the gang. Jed said, "We haven't done anything wrong." Jodie said, "We just got stuck." Cypher said, "Neil and Repty are still down there." Mr. Downing said, "I'm sure they'll be fine." Holly explained, "Officer Rick was trying to kill us. He held us at gunpoint. He's after Repty for something." So Neil and Repty are in the cave with 3 robot snakes. Repty asked, "Why have you guys come back here on Earth?" Serb said, "Because we scanned Officer Rick and he's registered as an enemy, and there's a base somewhere in the sewers. There's a weapon belonged to Kevnoch." Neil said, "Oh no." Ophidan asked, "You know about those creatures?" Neil answered, "Unfortunately, yes. We dealt with one of them 3 weeks ago." "What sort of weapon is it?" Serb said, "Weapon that's used to cook up the life forms so it tastes better to them." Repty said, "We have to warn the others." Serb said, "Acceptable, but be careful. Officer Rick isn't finished yet." So Neil and Repty left. Officer Downing barged into Shawson's lab, followed by Cypher, Holly, Jed, Quinn and Jodie. So Professor Shawson asked, "What's going on? Where's Neil and Repty?" Downing said, "They're still in the sewers." Later, Neil and Repty came in. Holly asked, "Where have you been?" Repty replied, "We've encountered my old friends from Snaketile again. You're in serious danger." Quinn asked, "What do you mean, danger?" Neil explained, "There's weapons under the sewers. Kevnoch are using them to cook us for a meal. Holly said, please tell me you're joking. Jed said, those are the creatures that kidnapped me 3 weeks ago. Jody asked, what is a Kevnoch? Neil explained, they're augur-like race who eats any living being. Cypher said, we destroyed one of them. Mr. Downing said, if that's the case, I'm going to be part of the group. Professor, for my daughter's sake. And oh, I've checked on your dad, Neil. He's okay. Neil said, thank you. Repty said, Officer Rick may be another Earth's threat. If only there's sufficient evidence to expose him. Neil said, yes, he's happened to be in the same sewers as Kevnoch. Professor Shawson said, question is, what is he up to? Meanwhile, inside experiment room of the sewers, Officer Rick operates the controls. In Shawson's lab, the multiverse manipulator is sparkling. Professor Shawson, Neil, Holly, Cypher, Repty, Officer Downing, Jed, Quinn and Jody had a look. Neil said, that's not normal, is it? Isn't it? Professor Shawson said, no, it's not normal. So she dials on the computer. And Repty said, multiverse manipulator is malfunctioning. Neil asked, is there anything we can do? Repty said, I'm going to put a stop to it. Neil said, I'll come with you. Officer Downing decided to tag along. As they walked towards the door, Downing said, stay safe everyone, especially you, Holly. Holly replied, I know, Dad. So Neil, Repty and Officer Downing stormed out the building. They got inside a police car. Downing drove it through London. Inside Kevnoch's spacecraft, there are 3 Kevnochs. They're operating the teleport, ready for battle. So Neil, Repty and Downing burst inside the experiment room. Seeing Officer Rick working, Repty said, stop the experiment, Rick. So Rick said, what a surprise, Repty. And you, Darrell, Downing, the traitor. Officer Downing said, we're going to stop you from whatever it is you're doing. Officer Rick said, oh, but you're mistaken. Before the invasion comes, there's something you want to know. I serve the Kevnochs. I am a Kevnoch agent. Neil horrifiedly said, you can't be. Rick said, I can be. We, Re Corporation, help Kevnoch race to get them food. Repty said, Re Corporation, a lot of us travelled there to stop your army from evil plans 5 years ago. We didn't know anything about Kevnochs at the time. Rick explained, yes, that's how I know you, Repty. That's why you're my enemy. I've always targeted you, which is why I sent that box of Lego Nindroids to Shawson's doorstep. I also placed a bomb in the co-op to turn you into a criminal. And, oh, pity none of you asked my real name. It's Rikus. So he pressed the button, and the army of Kevnochs have appeared. Meanwhile, in the lab, Professor Shawson, Holly, Cypher, Jody, Quinn and Jed have agreed to help Neil, Repty and Holly's dad. They stormed out the lab building. As they walked to the black car, Shawson said, there's not enough room in the car for everyone. Jed said, me, Quinn and Jody will get a taxi there. My best friend and his dad are in danger. They need our help. Holly replied, and my dad, while Repty, Neil and Downing are stepping backwards as Kevnoch army are walking towards them. 3 robot snakes came in. They fire their laser eyes, while Kevnoch shoots red lasers from their blasters. Neil and Downing took cover as they watch a lot of red and green jets flying all over the room. Professor Shawson, Cypher and Holly are inside a police station, begging a policeman behind the desk to let Sergeant Stark out as they need his help. Jed, Quinn and Jody make their way through the sewers and manage to get the lab. Neil and Downing sneaked out of the war zone, while Repty, Sub, Ophidan and Pythorn are facing off Kevnochs. Quinn asked, are you guys okay? Neil replied, yes, but we need to destroy that machine because it's going to fry us. Downing shouted, what? Jed said, we need to come up with a plan. Professor Shawson, Cypher, Holly and Sergeant Stark walked out the police station. Sergeant said, thank you for getting me out. We need to get to that underground base if my son is in danger. Meanwhile, the battle is still going on in the lab. Officer Rick shouted, do you really think I would not make myself laser-proof. Repty said, all we care about is destroy that machine, defeat Kevnoch, and stopping you. So all 4 robot snakes fired their lasers at the machine, which destroyed it. Officer Rick shouted, no! Neil, Officer Downing, Jody, Quinn, and Jed are cheering. Neil and Jody started to kiss each other. Jed clapped and said, I knew it, mate. I knew it. Then Officer Rick said, oh, how sweet. It's a shame that it'll become a ruin. So he pointed his gun at the gang. Downing said, put that gun down, Rick. Rick replied, no, you're going to pay for what you've done. If I kill all of you, take those 4 snakes with me from right here, right now, there'll be no witnesses. Suddenly, Professor Shawson, Sergeant Stark, Cypher and Holly burst in. Sergeant tackled Rick and disarmed him. So he pointed the gun at Rick. Neil said, yes, Dad, thank you. Thank you for rescuing him. Professor Shawson explained, I managed to stop the multiverse manipulator, but the problem is, it's unfixable. At least nothing can go wrong if it ever falls into the wrong hands. Sergeant flipped the switch on the back of Nick's neck, and suddenly Rick was deactivated. Ollie asked, is Rick a robot? Repty said, acceptable. Ray Corporation are androids, just like we're robot snakes. Shawson said, I'll take him to the Tower of London for safekeeping. Sergeant said, no problem, but don't mind if I take those equipments to Armstrong Industries HQ. At night, Neil was happy to see his mum and dad reconcile. Holly, Cypher and Officer Downing are walking down London Street. Officer Downing said, I just want to tell you, Cypher, you took good care of my daughter. So, welcome to the family. Holly smiled as she's happy to hear it. In the woods, in London, Serb, Ovidon and Python are about to get inside, and Repty said, I must stay on Earth. I value this world, and I'm here to protect it. Serb said, that's understandable. It's a very nice planet. Take good care of it. Ovidon said, you take care, Repty. Repty replied, you too. Python said, don't waste your life away. Serb said, farewell. So the 3 robot snakes got on board the pod. The pod started to lift off from the grass and then into the space. Professor Shawson drove her car outside of Tower of London, and Anthony tells his guards to let her in. Later, Sergeant Stark, Neil, Jody, Quinn and Jed played Dungeons and Dragons in Geek Retreat. Quinn said, you're very welcome here. After Shawson dropped Rick's robot body inside the Tower of London, she's about to leave, and Anthony said, just so you know, Alice, I'll do anything for you. The next day, Professor Shawson, Repty, Neil, Holly and Cypher are in a lab. Shawson said, now we don't need to run away from the law anymore. Holly said, it's Rick that we only ran away from. Cypher said, don't forget, he's an android from outer space. Neil said, I've legally changed my surname, so I'm no longer called Neil Ken. I'm now called Neil Stark. As my dad saves the world, I do as well. It runs in the family, so we're definitely back in business. Isn't that right, Repty? Repty answered, acceptable, Neil. Acceptable.